and welcome to the Mogwai Podcast. My name is Amanda Stanley, and in this episode I catch up with journalist and broadcaster Nicola Meighan to discuss the impact Mogwai have had on platforming artists through their ever-expanding label, Rock Action.
I think that the diversity is one of the things that's important, you know, and because it's like not all Mogwai songs sound the same, not all Mogwai albums sound the same, so I think it's an extension of that. It's saying, look, you know, this is the identity of the label. We love this music, we love that music, we love Sacred Paws. One thing I do think is quite interesting, you're right in that all the signings aren't from Scotland, but I do feel that it's quite a Glasgow label, and I love it for that.
Later in the episode, I head out to the Diving Bell Lounge studios in the East End of Glasgow to talk to Outlines, the collaborative project between James Graham of the Twilight Sad, Marcus Mackay, and most recent Rock Action signing, Kathryn Joseph.
And I think it's like similarities between like how like the way that like you talk about James, but when it, like there's things in their lives that feel the same about yours, and the same for me. You know, you're speaking to folk who are, you know, have waited till really late on their life to do something that they've been like worried or, you know, not had enough confidence to do before, and it's just like how similar we all are. Everyone you speak to has a similar, you know, attitude to their life or worries or ways of dealing with them.
But first, Nicola Meighan. I met the broadcaster, journalist and longtime champion of Mogwai in the Centre for Contemporary Arts in Glasgow, and began by asking her if she can remember where she first discovered the band.
It was in London in 1996 or maybe early 1997 that I very first saw Mogwai.
First saw Mogwai. So have you heard of them before then, or did you stumble into them in a venue one day?
A bit of both. I'd heard them on John Peel. What had happened, although I think there's a bit of self-mythologising going on, it can't have been quite as clear-cut as this, but here is my memory. I moved down to London in, I guess, the summer of 1996. And I started working for a happy hardcore label, importing Rotterdam hardcore, well versed in it from going to the Foo Bar in Stirling. And so ended up living in Ladbroke Grove in this funny little flat round the corner from this chocolate factory in which I was importing happy hardcore music and, of course, putting on my radio at night and listening to John Peel. So as my memory has it, on the first night I moved into this pokey little flat with the radio right beside my bed, I turned it on. And as I turned it on, I heard the immortal words. So that was the first big weekend of the summer.
No way.
True. As my memory has it. And I'm pretty sure, although it may not have been as clear-cut as that, of course, they're the opening lines from Arab Strap's The First Big Weekend. And I think on that same episode of John Peel, or if not, round about that same time, he was also getting big into Mogwai. So I moved down. It's the summer into the autumn of 1996. And I go, what the hell have I done? Everything's happening in Scotland. Amazing music, not on Rainbow Dayglow vinyl by DJ Paul Elstak, but mainly on Chemical Underground Records, Arab Strap, Mogwai, the Delgados. And soon thereafter, having immediately fallen for what I was hearing, and of course they're very different kind of sounds, Arab Strap and Mogwai. They're not like they were similar, but they had a kinship, they had a real kind of freedom about them. They sounded like nothing else. And I was like, bloody hell, Glasgow's amazing. And I think it was upstairs at the garage in Islington in London, and I can't quite remember what way round it was, but Arab Strap were playing and Mogwai were playing. So yeah, it's certainly like late 96 or early 97. Can't even remember what way round it was. I think Arab Strap were supporting, which was a revelation, of course. Aidan Moffat, Swans On, the bottle of Mad Dog 2020, as if I didn't love them enough. Played this incredible set. I remember Steve Lamacq standing beside me, actually, and I just was like looking at him, and he just looked absolutely mesmerised. We all were, you know. It was an absolutely incredible atmosphere night. Arab Strap were great. I'm like, how are you going to top that? And then on come Mogwai, and my overriding memory, I mean, it's a tiny venue, it's a toty stage, and they're making this utterly massive noise. But obviously, quite often, especially early on, I think, you know, they're a relatively static band live. but my memory is of Stuart Braithwaite swinging from the rafters or the speaker stacks or something late on. And do you know what? In all the years that I lived in London after that, I think I was there for maybe 7 or 8 in the end, I don't know that I ever felt more at home as I did upstairs at the garage that fateful night. And certainly that was my first run-in, almost physically, with Mogwai.
See, that's quite interesting as well, I think, because from talking to various other people, especially in the 90s, music was very much so centralised around London, and as we're going to be talking about Rock Action label, and you spoke about Chemical Underground and things. Was it such an anomaly? Like, it's like you've just left home and then all of a sudden you're like, no, wait, it's finally broken.
Oh, bloody hell. What's that? There was an element of what have I done? Because I'd grown up in Stirling. I'd gone constantly to see bands in Edinburgh and Glasgow. And there were always independent scenes. You know, of course, the kind of whole legacy of labels and bands goes back to the 70s and the kind of like DIY, post-punk from the Pastels, Postcard, Fast Product, of course, right through into the 80s. But the prevalent kind of scene in Glasgow, especially by the 90s, was rock music, male-orientated, fairly run-of-the-mill, and so venues only booked that. And that was, therefore, mainly what you would see if you went out and tried to find a band playing in Glasgow. Until, of course, you just lifted the lid or went into a basement, and there were all sorts of stuff happening, and there was this kind of revolution that centred, of course, around certain venues, the 13th note being the kind of fulcrum to some extent. What was happening in that basement, I think, changed the face of music, you know, in really, really important, many commercial ways with Franz Ferdinand, Mogwai, all these artists, but also in kind of philosophical ways as well. You know, I think feminism became a huge thing. The influence of Riot Girl was much more prominent because people were given a stage, often by R.M. Hubbard and Alex Kapranos, because they were kind of promoting Kazoo Club down there. So you had punk happening, you had indie happening, you had rock music, you had all these different sounds that weren't just the blue-eyed, so an awful term, but nonetheless basically what was getting programmed in the venues a lot of the time in Glasgow. Of course, that was why it was kind of a reaction against that.
So how did that reach London, do you think?
I think a lot of it was down to John Peel supporting that sort of music and putting it on a national platform. And I think also, to be honest, it was so refreshing to hear something that wasn't Britpop. We are talking about, you know, the mid-90s really. And my God, that was just kind of like relentless and quite exhausting. So I think as soon as you heard something new that was in a different voice, that was a different sound, that was forward looking and that wasn't entrenched in that kind of best of British thing, my God, it was just like clinging onto it, you know, jumping on it, and people absolutely loved it. I saw Arab Strap and Mogwai quite a lot down in London at that point, and I don't ever remember the gigs being anything else than packed out. Again, maybe I'm romanticising it in retrospect, but there was absolutely, from the word go, they spoke to tons of people, you know, everywhere, not just in Glasgow. They were never ever just kind of like Scottish bands. I think they always had an international appeal.
As a broadcaster and also music writer, you obviously cover a whole host of areas of music, from live coverage to reviews and things like this, but I want to take a moment to kind of carry on this kind of focus on the Scottish music scene, because in media you're often championing new talent, and I think that's something that Mogwai have continued to do over the years, and one of that ways I think is through the Rock Action label. Why do you think it's important for bands who do get to that level of success to continue lifting people up? Because you spoke about Alex Kapranos and R.M. Hubbard booking people back in the 90s, but it almost feels like that's kind of the underdog's way to do things. What do you think?
You're right, there is that kind of DIY element, and that's been a tradition really going back, as I say, to the 70s. You know, you have Postcard, and of course then what happens is that gives rise to major label artists, that gives rise to Orange Juice being huge in the 80s, and likewise you have this DIY, you know, almost, you know, it's almost like post-punk was, and punk was a response to something, that DIY was a response to what had gone before. And I think so was, if you want to call it that kind of Kazoo Club, mid-90s, 13th note revolution, was, as I say, a response to the fact that bands couldn't play anywhere else unless they sounded a certain way. And they didn't want to sound that way. They wanted to make new sounds and explore new themes and, you know, put other people on the stage and just try stuff out. It's the experimentation as well, isn't it? I think there's always something to be gained by an association with a better known band, you know, and I think because perhaps, certainly, I mean, I don't want to put words into their mouth, but when I've read interviews with Stuart or with the band in the past. You know, I think they just want to give the leg up that they felt they were maybe given a little bit. And also, do you know, it's not even that they're a well-known band. I think it's just the association of being artists running a label. You know, so I think you've got Chemical Underground, you've got the Delgados running that label, and I think it just means you've got such a different insight and understanding of what it is to be an artist. So I think it gives the label a real credibility. But there's no, you know, there's always going to be an understanding that there's a level of endorsement, you know, if you're on a label. So now it's like Rock Action, but of course you're only as good as what you're putting out, and they just, like Chemical, just put out excellent and really quite diverse bands.
Something that I do find interesting, it's almost as if, regardless of what genre or non-genre of music it is that they put out on that label, that there is this kind of trust because it's Mogwai that own it. Obviously they're so heavily involved in that label, and you can see it by who they sign and who's involved and who they bring out on tour with them and stuff like that. Like, they're very much so supportive in that regard. But do you think that is kind of the way forward for retaining in this kind of mad digital age of people not really caring so much about who's signed to what? They just kind of want the content. But there's something nice about how Rock Action is kind of curated by Mogwai, and if you were a Mogwai fan, you'd be like, well, I'm going to trust that, you know?
I think definitely. I think that it's got an identity and you invest in that. And I think that, you know, that's definitely a label that I would take a punt on. So even if I hadn't heard of an artist on it, I mean, I have that kind of completist thing anyway, you know, like there are certain labels where you want everything on that label. And also sometimes a band like Errors, like for me, I just heard and immediately adored them. Like Mogwai, although they're both largely instrumental, they come from a very different place, but they've got such a bright melodic instinct that I find totally irresistible. But then they're a completely different band to, say, Outlines, of course. They're kind of much more recent signing. But I think that the diversity is one of the things that's important, you know, and because it's like not all Mogwai songs sound the same, not all Mogwai albums sound the same. So I think it's an extension of that. It's saying, look, you know, this is the identity of the label. We love this music, we love that music, we love Sacred Pause. One thing I do think is quite interesting, you're right in that all the signings aren't from Scotland, but I do feel that it's quite a Glasgow label, and I love it for that. But that doesn't mean it's not an international label, you know. So whether it's instrumental music, which of course is universal in that appeal, or something like Outlines, which has a massive appeal but also is rooted, its stories, its very fabric is rooted in Glasgow. And Sacred Pause, who take kind of African rhythms and all sorts of global influences into their music, it's also rooted in Glasgow because it's rooted in the kind of indie history of Glasgow. It's rooted in Monorail Records, where Ailey works. So I think there are common threads, even though musically it speaks in all sorts of different directions and to all sorts of different people.
For you as a broadcaster and also a music writer, for you, what's it like knowing that these indie labels are still surviving? You know, like, does it give you hope as a music journalist?
Absolutely. And as a music fan, you know, I absolutely delight in the fact that an indie label from Glasgow can be having top 20, top 10 hits. I think that's absolutely brilliant. In the UK, on that kind of commercial level, and of course that, you know, I think that that's testament to Mogwai, of course, and their appeal. But the fact that that's a local label involved as well is hugely important. And I think that, in a way, it's the spirit of the thing. It's the ethos of it that is as important. I think that without labels like Rock Action, genuinely, think of all the records that wouldn't have existed, that we wouldn't have heard over the last few decades. And I think that it's so important to the kind of fabric of any music community to have these labels. Or, you know, in Edinburgh you've got Song by Tote. I just think it's so important to actually have something that has an identity, and it's a filter as well, isn't it? Because otherwise, where do you begin to find your music as a fan or as a journalist? Certainly it's like you do kind of look to go, okay, well, and you want to support the local labels, you want to support independent labels. As I say, before I moved back up here, I worked for one, and it's kind of like, I think if you have at heart that interest in music and in, I don't know, that idea of DIY, and there's the whole kind of record shop appeal of going in and saying, what's out, what have you got new on Chemical Underground, what have you got new in? And it is, so it's the identity of it, it's utterly the trust in it. But of course, as I say, that trust only exists as long as they don't put out a duff record, which they haven't as yet.
You mentioned Outlines and also Sacred Pause. I want to talk about both of them briefly. A band like Sacred Pause is quite a throw from something that Rock Action would usually put out, and also something that you would perhaps affiliate with Mogwai. But it works. It works somehow. And also, of course, they went on to win the Scottish Album of the Year. I know that you're heavily involved in that. What was it like seeing this band that kind of, again, in the same way as how Kathryn won as well, like kind of just came out of nowhere, really? There was always projects on the go with individual members, but then again, it might even just be Rock Action as well, like championing them again, but it felt like another movement happening in Glasgow.
I think there's a lot to be said for indie labels in general, and Rock Action in particular, with regard to Sacred Pause, giving projects room to breathe and to find themselves and to find their feet. And that's something I don't think major labels can really do, because there's so much money and expectation involved. And it's another really, really important thing about having these independent labels. Would Kathryn Joseph, have come to our attentions without, that time, because she'd been writing music for a long time before we heard it? And my goodness, to think that we wouldn't have heard it is appalling. A major label would never have sat on something for 10 years, it nearly was, wasn't it? Sacred Pause, Rock Action put out their EP, didn't they? So that was a while ago. And then obviously the point is, geographically it takes them a long time to get together to write songs. But again, just had faith and waited. And so I think it's testament to their patience. And also, you're right, they're not perhaps... But then what is the obvious Rock Action band? But in saying that, there is something about, as I say, the kind of Glasgow indie thing. There's lots of guitars on there, there's lots of lovely wee kinships. And I love the fact that, they were recording in Castle of Doom, and the music's just so at odds with the idea of being, even that name. And then you have this utterly bright, upbeat, forward-looking, thinking, sounding music that, again, might not have seen the light of day if it wasn't for an indie label, if it wasn't for Rock Action going, take your time. We know there's only so many megabuses you can get north and south to make a record. Do it in your own time. Yeah, I was overjoyed when they won it. I heard back. Vic Galloway and I were presenting the award, and I accidentally heard the broadcast of our announcement back, and, I just absolutely cheered their name out when we announced it. Maybe I was meant to sound more impartial. I was pretty excited. It felt like absolutely the right thing. And I tell you what else, it's like Kathryn Joseph, when the Scottish Album of the Year award started, Chemical Underground, Stuart Henderson, of course, closely involved in that. I'd write about the shortlists and the long lists and berate the fact that there just weren't that many women on it, and it's a difficult thing, because you want to be positive and you don't want to make it a dismissive thing, but by the same token it's like, please God, more women on it. And of course the last 3 years it's been Kathryn Joseph, Anna Meredith, Sacred Pause, and again you go, well, without these indie labels, without these kind of like these people just holding off and creating spaces, there would be less room for that.
Something like Outlines, I know you're a big Twilight Sad fan and also a Kathryn Joseph fan. Collaborations can work or sometimes they can't work, but for you, what was your first impressions when you heard that was happening?
I was really excited, because I think Kathryn Joseph and James Graham have two of the most striking, vivid voices in music, not just in Scottish music, musically and lyrically. And they're very different, but there's maybe something of a kinship there as well. And Marcus Mackay being involved was exciting, because I think that he has such a kind of stealth understanding of Kathryn's music and of space that it boded well. But then, of course, you get trepidatious, don't you? Because if you have such high expectations of something, as you say, a collaboration, you never know, is the chemistry going to work? How's that going to play out? And the interesting thing was, when I listened to them for the first time, it was in the best way everything I had expected. Not that it was in any way kind of predictable or unsurprising, but that I had, it was everything I had hoped it would be. And the fact that they're telling these stories and giving people these voices that would otherwise be unheard is an incredible thing. And again, it takes a certain label, I think, to go, yeah, this is absolutely important. This should be documented. There should be a record of these people's lives and stories. And it's beautiful, you know.
I said that I need this place as I hold your face. The colour's not grey, and come with me now. You call me your friend, you show me this place, but I've been disgraced, and I'm not sure.
Last time I caught up with Stuart from Mogwai, I asked him what drew him to releasing something like the Outlines project on Rock Action.
It's always the truth.
I'm a huge fan of James and Kathryn, but I also love the project. Alan Woodward, who used to play in the Delgados, just to add to the massive incest of the Glasgow music scene. He does a lot of great things involving the community with the Platform Arts Centre and with music. And yeah, James and Kathryn met a bunch of people and talked to them and really involved their stories and their lives in the music, and I think it's a really special record. And I saw their first show at Oran Moor actually when I got off the plane from America. That was peak jet lag, and it was absolutely amazing.
This is bad as it's been when you're not with me. This is bad as it's been. Make sure to miss me. If you see it through, you can see it through. If you see it through. I said that I need this place as I hold your face. The colour's not grey, and come with me now. I won't be around in the end.
I would like to introduce you to my band. We have James Graham on being a total prick and also being a really good singer. And keyboard and bass keyboard. Do you call it bass keyboard? What do you call it?
No,
Yeah.
don't just limit me.
On an
Bass
actual
keyboard.
musical instrument. We also have Marcus Mackay, man in control of everything and maker of all great noise, and much, much funnier than James. And me, Kathryn Joseph.
Definitely a prick.
So to begin with, can whoever wants to jump in first kind of talk a wee bit about, I guess for the listeners, because it's going to be quite an international scope of things for people listening, maybe just quickly with Outlines before we begin, talk about Platform itself and like where it's situated, and also like Outskirts Festival is probably a question for you to begin with.
Well, maybe because it's international, then you'll be able to understand Kathryn more than me. It was, what year was it? 2000 and... The year was 2000 and...
Was it not last year?
Was it last year?
Yeah.
It was last year. Yeah, it feels like a fucking age.
The year before.
I think it was the year before.
The year before.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago. That Alan Woodward. I said Alan Cumming yesterday. I got in touch with me. I was like, that's an actor. But Alan Woodward got in touch with me. Alan was in the Delgados. It'd been amazing if Alan Cumming had got in touch. Do you want to write some songs? Yeah. Yeah, you were Nightcrawler in X-Men. Yeah. Amazing. Sorry. Alan Woodward got in touch with me about Outskirts Festival and how there's an opportunity to get two artists together to collaborate, to write songs just for a one-off performance, and then you would have conversations with people that would visit Platform, which is an arts centre, a community arts centre in Easterhouse that just is welcome to everyone from that area to kind of, how do you say, to just I don't know, just get everybody involved in art. And there's a library and there's a swimming pool with flumes, which was pretty
James
cool.
did not get shot on, and that was quite an issue.
Yeah,
a lot of the time we were
that was the only reason I went, to be honest. But I was asked who would I like to collaborate with, and I think he gave me a list of people, and but I ultimately just said I'd like to work with Kathryn and Marcus, because I love the record, you know. And so Alan then got in contact with Kathryn, and basically she said yes, which was nice.
I only said yes because it was James. Like my original feeling was I won't be able to do that. I don't want to write with anyone else.
This is the thing I was thinking about when you announced this kind of collaboration, because I was like, it almost is like an achievement that you and Marcus do stuff together.
Yeah.
Because of how long we've gone back. Like, I've known you for so long, and I was just like, I remember when you first started working with Marcus, I was like, you with another person?
Yeah.
And then I was like, with this, I was like, another person?
Yeah, I know, because I just always think that I will be too shit and I won't be able to do it. But it's like we were talking about before, how it's the same, both of us, it's weird that we've ended up doing this, because it is totally out of our comfort zones to want to in the first place.
Yeah,
but
I would have usually picked somebody that I knew.
Yeah.
Like I knew Marcus for a long time, but like we had never met before this at all. And I would have probably picked somebody that was, I don't know, just kind of comfort zone kind of thing. Some strange came over me one day, and I was just like, I'll work with somebody I don't know at all about a project. It's quite daunting, and I'll go and talk to people I don't know from an area that I'm not from, and then we'll book a gig but not have any songs written for the gig. That sounds great for my stress levels. That'll be brilliant. I'll put myself in there.
So unique things come out of that kind of pressure and parameters, you know.
But I'm still a shitebag, so I would have probably ran a mile from it. Usually, that's why I'm quite surprised. And then from there on, we Alan scheduled like interviews with people of all ages from Easterhouse that use the Arts Centre. So it was like over a period of a month. We went in every week, maybe twice a week sometimes, and spoke to older women, older men, young like teenagers. Was there anybody our age?
Just that one lovely guy, Joe.
Yeah. There was like just people of all ages, really.
Had you ever done stuff with communities before, or like creatively with communities?
No, I don't think so.
You've done co-writing things before.
I did a thing. I did the Fruit Tree Foundation with Emma Pollock and Rod Jones. That was worked with Scott Frightened Rabbit and I think Kareem Polwart and things like that. Yeah, and Bruce Springsteen.
Alan Cummings was there.
Again. Again. The X-Men were all there. But I did that, but this was different. Like, that was just us going up to I'm not putting that down now because it was a great experience, but we went up to a cottage and got steaming and wrote songs together, where this was like stick you in a room with like there wasn't like an agenda of like let's talk about this. We just sat in a room. We didn't like record it or anything either, just because we felt that would be people would speak to us more openly if instead of like seeing a recorder there. And and as I said, we didn't know each other. So it was getting to know each other whilst getting to know this person next to us. It wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. It was hard because the stories were hard. You know, like it was. You'd say like some of them was pretty like harrowing. Some of the stuff that we were told.
Did you like have an idea of what you wanted to talk to folks about, or
no? It was absolutely just.
What have you been up to?
It was pretty. I mean, pretty much was started like that, you know, and then and it's just it was pretty fascinating what people want to tell you, or how like the bits of their life that they think or just come into our heads at that time, you know. It was amazing. It was amazing doing it.
I just kind of went and we didn't. I said nothing planned, and I would like to say that's just because I was like, yeah, I'll go in and open my. I was like, no, I'm just lazy. It's just like went in and we just spoke to. I think that was the good thing is we didn't do that. We just went in and spoke to people and didn't go, well, tell us about this, tell us about that. It was just a conversation that then sparked for them to tell us things that maybe they wouldn't have if it was in a written down questionnaire or something like that, we were all both surprised like how open people were.
I guess like also just generally I feel like Scotland or like Glasgow specifically, people just love to talk, like
Yeah.
overshare.
True.
And then so,
Yeah.
but then I guess like when you're doing something like what you did, the conversations were, like you said, a lot more like kind of harrowing, and it wasn't necessarily, oh, here's this funny anecdote.
Yeah.
But it was
But they
that,
would go in between that, though. It
totally.
was like, they'd be
That's so Glasgow for me, but or so Scottish for me, or it's just like 1 minute, so someone's telling you the saddest thing you've ever heard, and the next second it's really funny, and they're just like how strong everyone was, no matter what had happened to them or what they were having to deal with in their lives. It was just there was no feeling sorry for themselves, was it? It was just a straight away like, but we're lucky and we get to do that. Like women who they'd volunteered for the Commonwealth Games, it was like the best thing they'd ever done, and it was beautiful, and they wouldn't, the fact that they'd signed up for it through platform, that probably something that they would never have got involved with if that hadn't been there. And and the guy that was now doing acting, and he'd been like not well.
He had trouble leaving the house and
Yeah.
things like that, but this has given him a reason to get up and get out. And like he was getting involved in acting and drama classes and all that. And like you were saying, this wouldn't be something that I would ever have found myself even going close to.
Yeah.
But just because this is here and it was offered to me and I was told like to go along to it, it's just opened up this. He's like, I still struggle to leave the house and stuff, but this has given me a reason to get up and get out, which was like, fucking hell, that's pretty.
Yeah, and I think it's similarities between like how like the way that like you talk about James, but when there's things in their lives that feel the same about yours, and the same for me. You're speaking to folk who are have waited till really late on in their life to do something that they've been like worried or not had enough confidence to do before, and it's just like how similar we all are. Everyone you speak to has a similar attitude to their life or worries or ways of dealing with them.
Once a week, I lock the doors and I draw the curtains. If it wasn't for you, it would be like this all the time. Why does smiling not suit me? And why does a frown seem to fit my face? You say it's the other way around.
There is a safe place in this dark. There is an end and then a start. And in my head, and in my blood, and in my heart, and in my world, and in my head, and in my blood, and in my heart, and in my world.
I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it.
It was one of those ones where it was like at the end of the day, like we're driving home going, bloody hell, that was intense but really rewarding at the same time. That whilst we were doing that, Marcus was actually thinking about the songs.
Yeah, thankfully Marcus was doing some real work.
We're away going, hey, what you up to? Marcus is like, there's a job to be done.
So what were you up to at the time then?
I think I kind of came in just right at the very end, and I got some sort of sound samples from the actual building to get that drawn into the record. At one point I had a snare drum in the library and had to go up and explain to people what I was doing, because it's quite an unusual scenario, a quiet place, and to have a snare drum. And just to get the acoustic sound of it, and then hand claps and stuff like that. So all those kind of sounds that are in the record, some are obviously just off of some things, and other ones are actually from the platform place. I thought it was a good way to draw some of the actual sound of the place into it as well. But I didn't do any of the kind of harrowing listening to.
You should have said to the people reading books in the library, it's an interactive book. Oh, this in the chapter there's a snare drum, like bang.
Turn the page and you hear the
I
sound.
love that we were sitting
Harry Potter and the snare
sitting in
drum.
the room, we could like hear Marcus like banging a drum in the corridor. It's like everything's fine. Just keep talking.
And so
It's great.
obviously like the initial plan was just to have a one-off performance. So where did the record come from then in that sense?
Well, there's so much effort that goes into a one-off performance. You write the songs, 4 songs, 5 songs, rehearse it, take it to a performance level, and I thought, it's crazy putting all that work in without actually recording it and marking it somehow, and I was quite surprised that no one had actually done it before. Maybe they'd recorded it like the actual live performance, but I wanted to it was also a process that could help us write the songs as well, by having the studio here. We could go in and go, right, there's a drum beat, there's a harmonium line, let's put some lyrics and melody to that, as opposed to all sitting in the room trying to write together, because I don't know if any of us actually sit and write
None
like
of us
that.
wanted to do that.
Do you know what I mean? So it was a kind of a solo exercise in terms of like, I'll start something, send it out, get stuff back, and then we get together after that. Do you know what I mean? It's having that space to be able to let something generate, I think.
What was it like as all individual musicians in yourself, but also now as collaborators? What was
Thank
it
you for
like?
calling me a musician.
A musician.
Ah, is that the first time ever?
I am now. I can play something.
I've heard what you can play. But what was it like taking something that you would probably take, like in terms of influence and direction for even just one song, you would probably look inward as opposed to reaching out to someone else's vulnerable, sensitive experiences. How did you find that?
I was just really selfish about it and related it all back to myself.
But you didn't. But you did.
I did
But
in
you
a way,
still
like-
totally. It's still that still counts. I think.
Yeah,
you know.
I would, when Marcus sent me over like the harmonium parts and stuff like that, I would think about what like the discussions were. I was thinking about that was in my head. I wasn't going to directly go, right, that guy told me that, I'm going to write that down. I was like, I let that influence the way I was feeling about what maybe a parallel in my life that was happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And there was really strange parallels at the same time. I think with both of us
Yeah,
were saying to the
definitely.
people that we were talking to. So it was like I kind of let that guide the way and didn't think about it too much. Just like started to have that in the back of my mind, but just whatever came out, and that's what happened. Instead of really going, I'm going to write about that meeting, I'm going to write about that meeting, I'm going to write about that, I'm just going to go think about how the whole experience that day had made me feel. You know, like miserable.
In a
great.
winner, whole beautiful songs in a winner. That's how he writes, and then sends them through with it's maybe not good, and we're like, it's perfect, you bastard. And then I have to go and try and write something. Yeah.
Well, that was good. That was good in a way that, you know,
It made me want to.
It started quick, and it wasn't that it was easy, but it was that it was right.
Mm.
You know,
natural as
Yeah.
well, really natural.
Yeah.
I sent something over to James, and James sent something back that day, and it didn't change.
Was it more like reactive than?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that how you write all the time? Yeah.
And then Andy chops it up to like deletes all the shit bits, but there's still shit bits in there. But I all in a one, and then kind of then he shapes it more. But actually with this, the songs were the structures are pretty much.
Nothing really got changed. Even with the
Yeah.
harmonium parts, they kind of came out. I mean, I'd never played the harmonium before, and I thought I'd get the harmonium in because Kathryn left it here, and I wanted to put the harmonium part down so I could put some drum beats to it, and then remove the harmonium part, so I had a start point. So I was like tricking my brain, but then actual stuff just came out in fairly complete chunks. And I was like, well, okay, this is, I seem to have managed to trick myself well enough to do this, you know, as opposed to having to think about doing it. Sometimes you look at something head on, you can't see it or do it. Do you know what I mean? You have to take it from another angle, and that's what worked out.
Do you feel like there's Kathryn songs and James songs then?
There are. Yeah.
Not as
We
much
kind
as
of-
maybe it used to feel. Now it kind of feels.
No.
It seems for me anyway. It feels
feels
blended a lot more.
Yeah.
I guess like you were quite like the kind of perhaps like center point in a lot of it as well.
But I was worried about that at the start, about if there was going to be too much division between stuff, and I think having the harmonium and the piano in there has allowed to break that up. I think it's blended okay now. I think I don't see
I
it.
think we've both added to each other's, like, do you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
From like vocally wise, like when like you would bring something, and then there'd be the songs that Marcus and I wrote together, but then you would bring something to them, and then I would bring. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It was like
Yeah.
with the bones of a song was there, and then we would all complement each other. Do you know? My dad likes it.
That's all I care about.
Put that on the front sleeve.
James' dad. I liked it.
It's alright.
Sorry, 7 out of 10.
And it's always interesting to see how voices are going to blend, because you don't actually know that till you hear it, and potentially it's going to work. And then we were in here just putting down some stuff, recording stuff, and it's like, oh good, that works.
Here are the lights where I feel made of you and her and me, and all around me.
does sound like a very collaborative effort in terms of balance. Like, there's no like.
No, it feels really equal.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah.
Did you feel really pressured to make sure it was like that, or was that like as soon as you came in, just started?
It's in the back of your mind. It doesn't drive it. You have to just be open and let what is coming out come out.
But
it's there.
you want it to be that. You want it to be that it's all equal parts and making sense of all of us doing something. But yeah, I find it weird that I didn't really think about our voices at the beginning. I feel like I should have thought, I sing like an old crow witch and James sings like a beautiful, unbelievably amazing human. How will those two voices go together? But it's
totally.
like it's really weird.
Like, I'm still asking myself.
How the fuck did that?
I know. And then it's like,
That's exactly how I would describe it.
And then it's like, oh, they do, and I love it. I really love it.
When you're gonna hold me tight, hold me
There's one of those things where I kind of knew in my head that it would work for some. I mean, because we have different kinds of voices, but there was the stories that you tell through your music and the stories that I tell through mine. That's the thing that kind of made me go, what? But like the style we write in and the things we're writing about, if they're very similar. So I think no matter what, something will be there.
Yeah.
I mean, it might not be for everybody, but it's like something's going to work there.
Just for your dad. Your dad likes it.
But again, you still don't know until you actually.
Yeah.
You go.
I even like when we were recording it, I remember you being like, "This works," you know, because I was like, "Does it?"
Well, it's one of those hurdles you have to kind of get over and go, right, hopefully this is easy because it's the main thing.
Yeah. Could have been like, if it wasn't working that well, it could be like, right, you sing that bit, then you sing that bit, just don't sing together.
Yeah.
Like, never sing together.
Yeah, well, that would be one way around.
Yeah. But the fact is, it started singing together. It was like, this is.
Plus, you were singing in maybe different ways than maybe like you usually sing.
Totally.
We were kind of
There's been
using different techniques or whatever.
Softer and more like, but still belting it at some bits. We've all done things that we're not like, taking ourselves out of our comfort zone, if you know what I mean, and tried new things. That's what we've all done, and definitely the way I've sung some of it. I think so. Anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
In terms of recording, Marcus, what did you want to achieve from that?
I think the recording process was a natural part of the writing process. It wasn't live until it was written, because we weren't sitting in a room jamming it out. It was like, so it had to be written, and the way to do that is use the technology and the equipment here. And so for me, it was just building it up and then getting it to the point where there's a song there, and now we've got to breathe some life into it by learning it and performing it. So there wasn't an end sound in mind. It was kind of part of the writing process, and it was layered up, and then it's go right, redo this bit, and it started to forge itself through that. So I didn't have an end goal of sound, and even to the point where I didn't mix it. Tony Dugan mixed it, and which was great. So I've got distance from it, so I can listen to the records. If I'm mixing it and doing all that, it's a lot harder for me to have any perspective from it. So it was good. So the sound was still being forged then, and then it was mastered after that. So the sound was still being forged about what that was, and then going back to the live show, you're kind of taking some of those elements that was in the recording, going, we can add this in now, another layer to it, So it was. I mean, it's still kind of in.
It's still developing.
Modulation in a way, yeah. So it's still kind of growing what that sound is and how we present it live.
How did Rock Action get involved in it?
Because I kind of work there when I'm not doing the other miserable band. I kind of just emailed Stuart saying, one of those kind of emails going, look, there's this thing that I've done, like I'm part of, do you have a listen to the bits, see what you think, if you don't like it, don't reply to me. Like,
or ever look
then
at
he didn't reply to me for a while actually. I was just like, I was quite confident with that actually. And then Stuart and Craig, like I was in the office one time and Craig said to me, so what's happening with this project? And I was just like, I'm just still looking for a label to put it out. And Stuart was telling me, he's like, well, do you want to talk to us? And I was just like, aye. I'm confused here. I emailed, but then I basically we just sat down. Did we sit down with him? No, we just spoke to them.
Yeah.
I just went and spoke to them, and then we all just went, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And they did it. They did it. And I think it's really good that they've taken I don't say taken a gamble on it, but like, this is not a band that they're going to go, right, they're going to go and they're going to tour this round for so often, they're going to do this promo, that thing. They saw the project for what it was, and it was like, it was quite a special, maybe possibly a one-off, who knows, down the line there could be more. But even if it was just a one-off, they were like,
Still
yeah,
willing to
we
commit to it.
want to commit and like put that out there and kind of get the record and the story out there.
I told you so. I can't change if I follow your path. I'll stay the same if you hold my hand. I'll still stray. I wanna change. I hope you stand in my way. Are you coming out to play? Our toys are not the same. For you, I will not change. Our toys are not the same. Take you down with me. Take you down with me. I'll take you down with me. Take you down with me.
Outlines LP Conflats is out now via Rock Action, and Kathryn Joseph from the group is also, as I mentioned, the latest signing to the Rock Action family. Be sure to keep an eye out what she'll be releasing in the coming months. Thanks again to Nicola Meighan, Stuart Braithwaite and Outlines for taking the time to talk on this episode. Mogwai are heading out on tour again in May, so head to mogwai.co.uk for a full list of tour dates. You can follow them on their socials at Mogwai Band, and finally, be sure to hit subscribe on this podcast so you never miss a future episode.
Take you down with me. Take you down.